Okay, this is actually good news. This story comes from somewhere. This story comes from the Irish Times. RFK Jr. commits to measles U-turn amid deadly Texas outbreak. Like all of you, I fucking hate this guy. I hate him. He's done an irreparable amount of damage. But I do want to say that amidst the measles outbreak, which is just getting worse, by the way, because that's what's going to happen.
It's not getting any better.
Oh, magically.
It's not like spontaneously going into remission, Tom.
Like for those of you guys who don't know, measles is the most contagious disease. Most.
Yeah.
That's it. Like there's nothing. So the infectivity or contagiousness of stuff is measured by its R0 number. And like very simply from as I've understood it, the R0 number is essentially like how many people statistically one infected person is likely to infect. Something like COVID has an R0, and it depends on the variants that have come out.
It's like 3 or something.
But it's around 2.5 to 3.8. It varies, like I said, like depending on, from what I've read, depending on which variant, because some of them are more contagious than others. Measles is 18. 18. It's the most contagious thing, straight period, that is out there. Measles can like live in the air. It can live on surfaces. It can live like, you could like be in a fucking elevator and get out of the elevator, and an hour later, someone could walk into that elevator and get measles that you were just, it's crazy contagious. If only there was a solution.
Yeah. Right.
Cecil.
Yeah. Well, we have the vaccine, which we've had for a long time.
The MMR vaccine.
There's a lot of people who have been convinced by bad actors and by very, very, very stupid people that the vaccine is unsafe, that the risks of injury from the vaccine are greater than the risks of injury from measles, which is just not true.
Not true at all.
There's a reason why we made the vaccine in the first place. We made the vaccine because we knew that it was killing people, which people have already died of this measles outbreak. People have already died in this measles outbreak. So like when people say measles isn't that big a deal, you can always point to the very recent death from measles. It's not just that, it could cause other problems with your immune system later on in your life. It can cause blindness, and it's unpleasant, right? It's really unpleasant. So a bunch of people have this, and RFK is even rolling back his very serious anti-vax stance, which he's had for a long time. This is a man who's constantly said in all these different places. In fact, he was quoted as saying, "There, like, no vaccine is safe." I'm misspeaking it like perfectly, but that's the gist of what he said. That's not an exact quote, but that is the gist of what he says. Is essentially, no vaccine is safe. There is no safe vaccine. He said that. He's on the record as saying that. So this is our Health and Human Services guy who's now saying, well, I don't have an answer. There is no answer other than, like, when the rubber hits the road with a real epidemic, all those people who all talk shit about not vaccinating your kids, I 100% think at this point, several of those people who were convinced to not do it are going to do it.
Yeah, well, like, the thing is, like, RFK was one of the 12 most prolific purveyors and disseminators of vaccine disinformation and misinformation. One of the most influential anti-vax people measured on social media. An enormous amount of all the anti-vax stuff that is floated around came from 12 people.
Sure.
And RFK Jr. he was one of those people.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, turned around. And I'm glad he turned around. I'm glad, because there are people that will listen to him.
Yeah.
There are people that will say, oh shit, and they'll go to get their kid a fucking vaccine, because that's the only thing that is going to help.
Yeah, it's the only thing that's going to save him.
It's a fucking vaccine, or maybe you get measles, and it's awful to get the measles. There's this idea that floats around too, and you see it on social media a lot, that kids used to get sick all the time and it made them tougher. It made their immune system stronger. And there is some evidence that some amount of exposure, particularly to bacteria, to funguses, to allergens, does have a positive impact on building a strong immune system. It is important to note that the evidence is exactly the opposite for viruses. There is no advantage at all in getting a virus. getting sick with viruses is always worse than not getting sick with viruses. Everything I've ever read on this, there's no virus that you get that like you would not be better off had you not gotten it. You would always be better off not getting that virus. If we could skip getting all the viruses, that's the thing we should do. We're so cavalier about this stuff.
Yeah.
And we're cavalier about it even as the evidence continues to mount for severe post-viral syndromes. There's a growing body of evidence that suggests that there are a lot of autoimmune and other conditions which have their root in childhood viral illnesses. So like, it's to our benefit to not get sick. And what a crazy thing that we have to say out loud. Like, hey, you know what's better? Not getting sick.
Yeah, yeah.
But we do, because like there's an idea floating around that like, like you just got to catch yourself a little bit of the measles and, how else are you going to strengthen your immune system? And it's like, that actually weakens it.
Yeah.
That you're wrong.
And I think too, the people who are consistently sending that message are often outside of things that are sort of the target group that can be severely damaged by these things, right?
Right.
So often it's people who, if I were to get the measles as an adult, it's probably not as bad as if I got it as a child. And so that's a person who should be advocating for the child, but instead are convincing people not to vaccinate. Same thing when it goes to like people like Joe Rogan and his listeners and those types of people who bash on COVID vaccines. Those are people who, for the most part, probably won't be as affected by the COVID itself than if you were an elderly person. Like that type of person who really benefit, very much benefit. Everybody benefits from the COVID vaccine, but the person who would benefit more would be an elderly person. And the people who are the loudest saying not to take it are the ones that are in the area where it's not really going to hurt them if they don't, as much. It won't hurt them as much. So, those are the people I think you want to trust the least on that.
It like what always cracks me up about that shit too is like those people are like, well, I'm young. And I always think to myself, you understand that that's not a perpetual state of being, right? Like you will at some point.
One day.
Yeah. Don't you want to live in a world?
One day you will crack open your first bottle of Centrum Silver. That's going to happen.
It is. Don't you want to live in a world where like when you're old, the young people have lived in an ethos that has not said, let's discard you?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I want to live in that world.
Yeah, right? Like, isn't that a better place? Isn't that a better place in the world?
Even just selfishly.
Yeah.
Even if all I care about is me, unless I'm a complete asshole that doesn't understand how time works.
That's a better place.
I have to understand that, like, I'll be better protected.